On the first day of July in 1944, at the Hollandia airbase situated in New Guinea, a quartet of P-38 Lightnings safely landed, having completed an arduous 6.5-hour sortie deep within hostile airspace. Upon disembarking, 3 of the aviators discovered their fuel indicators registered perilously low, indicating perhaps a mere 50 gallons remaining in their reserves. However, the 4th formidable warplane, piloted by a 42-year-old civilian, remarkably still possessed a substantial 210 gallons in its tanks, despite undertaking the identical mission, encountering the same meteorological conditions, and operating the same type of aircraft. This particular aviator had, by some extraordinary means, consumed a staggering 200 gallons less fuel than even the most skilled fighter pilots stationed across the vast Pacific theater. The lead ground crew chief, a seasoned veteran of countless refuelings, scrutinized his fuel stick with disbelief, then meticulously rechecked the reading, convinced of an error. For an extended period, American airmen had diligently operated these powerful twin-engine fighters in strict accordance with the official operational guidelines, maintaining an engine speed of 2,200 revolutions per minute, RPM, and employing auto-rich mixture settings. Every intricate procedure had been rigorously ingrained in them since their earliest days in flight school. They had been emphatically instructed that any departure from these established norms would inevitably lead to catastrophic engine failure, asserting that operating over square, a condition characterized by elevated manifold pressure coupled with reduced RPM, constituted an act of professional recklessness, virtually guaranteeing aerial disaster. Yet, as they stood on that sweltering New Guinea airstrip, observing fuel consumption figures that utterly contradicted every tenet of engine management held sacred by the Army Air Forces, a profound and unsettling query permeated the dense, humid Pacific atmosphere. Could it be possible that the fundamental principles they had been taught concerning flight operations were, in fact, erroneous? A game of checkers had unfolded for approximately 20 minutes when a distinct rap echoed from the screen door. Colonel Charles MacDonald, deeply engrossed in strategizing his next move across the alternating red and black squares, barely diverted his attention, his intellect fully consumed by the intricate calculations of the board. The oppressive afternoon heat, a constant companion in this tropical climate, bore down relentlessly on their provisional command post at Hollandia Air Base. Across the table, Lieutenant Colonel Merrill Smith mirrored MacDonald's absorption, equally captivated by their impromptu pastime, one of the sparse recreational outlets available in this remote quadrant of Netherlands, New Guinea. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. "Excuse me, gentlemen," a voice interjected, imbued with an understated yet undeniable authority that finally compelled MacDonald to lift his gaze towards the entrance. Standing framed in the doorway was a man of middle age, clad in navy khaki attire, his uniform remarkably pristine and uncreased, defying the pervasive humidity of the environment. He then introduced himself succinctly. "I'm Charles Lindbergh." MacDonald's hand, poised to advance a checker piece, became instantly motionless. The iconic name Lindbergh lingered in the heavy air, carrying the profound weight and impact of a somber memory, akin to the lingering smoke from a downed aircraft. Smith's eyes subtly widened in recognition and surprise, while MacDonald found himself scrutinizing the seemingly ordinary civilian figure, grappling to reconcile the colossal legend of the individual with the unassuming man now present in their quarters. He articulated his astonishment, asking, "Are you referring to that Charles Lindbergh, the legendary aviator who accomplished the historic solo transatlantic flight to Paris some 17 years prior?" "General Hutchinson dispatched me," Lindbergh calmly proceeded, stepping further into the confines of their somewhat cramped living space. "He was of the opinion that I might contribute meaningfully to a discussion regarding your P-38 combat operations," he elaborated, indicating the serious nature of his unexpected arrival. MacDonald rose deliberately from his seat, the ongoing checker game now completely eclipsed from his mind, despite his significant command at the age of 29, leading the formidable 475th Fighter Group. He had, like countless others, been raised on thrilling accounts of Lindbergh's unparalleled Atlantic crossing. For virtually every aviator in America, the iconic aircraft, the Spirit of St. Louis, transcended mere aviation history. It symbolized the pivotal juncture when aerial travel evolved from audacious circus spectacles into a legitimate and transformative mode of transportation. And now, that very same pioneering pilot stood within their humble tent, seeking insights into their everyday experiences of executing demanding combat missions across the immense expanse of the Pacific Ocean. "Of course, Mr.
Lindbergh, please make yourself comfortable," MacDonald courteously offered, indicating an available folding chair. He then promptly summoned Colonel Warren Lewis, recognizing the imperative of his presence. If the conversation was to delve into the intricate details of P-38 operations, Lewis's expertise was indispensable. As the commanding officer of the 433rd Fighter Squadron, he possessed an unparalleled understanding of the grim and relentless logistical challenges defining their present predicament. Colonel Lewis materialized within mere minutes, his flight suit still clinging to him, noticeably damp from the residual perspiration of the morning's briefing session.
Upon observing their distinguished visitor, his customary professional demeanor faltered ever so slightly. "Mr. Lindbergh, what an unexpected pleasure," he began. "What brings you to our rather unique corner of what we ironically refer to as paradise?" The profound irony of his remark was not lost on anyone present. Paradise, indeed, if one considered a landscape defined by scorching metal hangars, relentlessly baking beneath the fierce tropical sun, and ever-present, unyielding mud that stubbornly refused to dry, and the ceaseless, irritating hum of insects that appeared impervious to every form of repellent the quartermaster could possibly supply.
Yet Lewis's inquiry was genuinely posed, reflecting a sincere curiosity. What could possibly motivate the world's most celebrated aviator to concern himself with their specific fighter operations? "My purpose here is primarily to learn," Lindbergh responded with characteristic directness and simplicity, "and perhaps to offer a few observations I've gathered concerning the complexities of long-range aerial navigation and endurance flying." Lewis then found a seat in another folding chair, and MacDonald keenly observed his colleague's mental transition into a more formal briefing posture. "Well, Mr. Lindbergh," Lewis began, adopting a serious tone, "our operational reality here is, regrettably, quite uncomplicated. We are currently undertaking missions,
that relentlessly test the absolute maximum capabilities of these aircraft. The colonel produced a well-used map, carefully unfurling it across MacDonald's desk and setting the checkerboard aside. His finger methodically traced intricate flight paths, stretching across hundreds of miles of the vast cerulean Pacific waters, which were sparsely punctuated by diminutive islands. These landmasses, though appearing inconsequential on the map, represented critical life-or-death navigational beacons for pilots soaring in isolation over the seemingly boundless ocean.
A grueling 6.5 to 7 hours, Lewis elaborated, his voice now imbued with the precise, measured cadence of an individual who had computed these critical figures innumerable times. That is the demanding duration we are now imposing upon our young airmen. Operations that were considered entirely unfeasible merely a year ago are now transitioning into standard, everyday occurrences, and the critical fuel margins. He paused, shaking his head slowly, the gesture conveying a depth of concern words could not fully express. MacDonald observed Lindbergh as he meticulously scrutinized the map, his gaze possessing the acute intensity of a seasoned engineer poring over intricate blueprints. His distinctive pale blue eyes methodically traversed from one island to the next, silently calculating distances, with the unerring precision of an individual whose entire professional life had been dedicated to mastering the concepts of aerial range and endurance. It was the unmistakable expression of a pilot who grasped, at a profound level, that fuel represented far more than a mere numerical value on an instrument gauge. It embodied precious time aloft, measurable distance covered, and most crucially, the very essence of survival itself. The P-38L model officially boasts a published combat radius of 570 miles, Lewis clarified, providing specific technical details.
However, in our day-to-day operational reality, we are consistently extending that stated limit on virtually every mission. Our established standard operating procedures mandate engine speeds between 2200 and 2400 RPM, coupled with auto-rich mixture settings. Under these conditions, our total fuel consumption frequently exceeds 100 gallons per hour. Lindbergh responded with a deliberate, slow nod. Yet MacDonald discerned a particular quality in his expression. It was not one of bewilderment or unfamiliarity, but rather a profound sense of recognition, akin to an experienced mechanic identifying symptoms of a recurring mechanical issue he had previously diagnosed and resolved. These young men returned from their sorties utterly depleted, Lewis continued, painting a vivid picture of the human cost. Spending 7 continuous hours confined within that cramped cockpit, perched atop a parachute, an emergency raft, and an oar, constitutes an ordeal bordering on torture. The sheer physical exertion is a significant burden in itself, but the relentless mental pressure. He gestured once more towards the map, emphasizing the gravity of their situation. Every single mission briefing inevitably devolves into an agonizing fuel calculation. Critical questions constantly arise. What is our absolute minimum fuel reserve? How extended can our loitering time over the target be?
And most critically, precisely where lies our irreversible point of no return? Absolute point of no return. The immense strain of such calculations was something MacDonald had witnessed firsthand. He observed young aviators, some barely out of their teenage years at 21, hunched intently over their flight planning tables. Armed with slide rules and sharpened pencils, they meticulously computed the critical operational margins that would ultimately dictate their survival. Whether they would greet another dawn. Far too many courageous individuals had already succumbed not to the enemy's bullets, but to the devastating consequence of empty fuel tanks. The equations governing their missions were brutally unforgiving. To run out of aviation fuel over the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Pacific Ocean meant that any hope of rescue was, at best, a remote and improbable prospect. The sheer immensity of the ocean swallowed mistakes whole, leaving no trace. "And the situation is deteriorating," Lewis remarked in a subdued tone. "Our designated targets are progressively receding further into the distance. Initially, we were concerned with places like Rabaul and Wewak. Now our discussions revolve around ambitious missions deep into the heart of the Philippines."
The theater of war is undoubtedly shifting westward, yet our aircraft's intrinsic fuel capacity unfortunately remains static, failing to evolve with these escalating demands. This disparity between strategic necessity and existing capability presented a formidable, often deadly, challenge. Lindbergh, for his part, absorbed every word without interjection, only occasionally posing precise inquiries concerning critical engine parameters, such as mixture settings, propeller pitch, or optimal cruise altitudes. His questions were remarkably incisive, deeply technical, and unveiled a profound comprehension of intricate aircraft systems that genuinely astonished MacDonald. This was clearly not merely a celebrated figure engaging in polite, superficial conversation. Rather, it was an exceptionally knowledgeable pilot who possessed an unparalleled mastery of power plant management, a level of expertise that most combat flyers, focused primarily on aerial engagement, rarely attained. We invite you to stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Please leave a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Have you extensively experimented with various cruise configurations? Lindbergh finally inquired, breaking the silence with a probing question. Lewis and MacDonald exchanged a quick, meaningful glance, a silent acknowledgment of the established protocols. "The technical orders are quite explicit on this matter," Lewis responded cautiously, choosing his words with care. "We adhere strictly to the prescribed standard operating procedures for engine management. This typically involves maintaining high RPMs and utilizing rich fuel mixtures. That, sir, is what reliably keeps these powerful Allison engines functioning optimally and enduring the rigors of combat." A subtle, almost imperceptible alteration occurred in Lindbergh's demeanor. It was not an overt display of disagreement, but rather the contemplative expression of someone who had just encountered a piece of conventional wisdom that simply did not align with his own vast and unconventional practical experience in long-distance aviation. His mind, clearly, was processing a different set of realities. "Mr. Lindbergh," MacDonald began slowly, his voice tinged with a newfound curiosity, "you earlier alluded to certain observations you've made regarding extended-range flying. Could you elaborate on the nature of these observations?" He was now genuinely intrigued, sensing a deeper insight. For the very first time since his arrival in their quarters, a faint smile graced Lindbergh's lips. "Would you be amenable to a practical hands-on demonstration?" he proposed. "I successfully completed my checkout in the P-38 a few days ago,
even flying Richard Bong's venerable old aircraft to this base. I would be most keen to join one of your upcoming combat missions to illustrate my findings." The audacious request hung suspended in the thick, humid air that permeated their space. MacDonald immediately felt the immense weight of his command responsibilities settle heavily upon his shoulders. Permitting a civilian, even one as globally renowned as Charles Lindbergh, to participate in active combat operations introduced a layer of risk that stretched far beyond the established parameters of any routine mission.
Yet something in the man's quiet, unwavering confidence suggested that this was far from mere idle curiosity or a celebrity's whim. It was a matter of serious intent. "What exactly did you envision?" MacDonald inquired, his question indicating a cautious willingness to entertain the extraordinary proposal. The recreation hall at Hollandia had unmistakably witnessed more prosperous times, though MacDonald struggled to recall precisely when. Its packed earth floors, hardened by countless months of relentless foot traffic, and a palm-thatch roof that invariably leaked during the predictable afternoon downpours, spoke volumes of its utilitarian existence. A lone battered ping-pong table served as the squadron's sole source of communal entertainment during precious downtime, when they weren't engaged in perilous flying missions or the ceaseless maintenance of their warbirds. Bare, unshaded light bulbs dangled precariously from the rafters, casting harsh, unflattering shadows that accentuated the premature aging and profound weariness etched onto every face. MacDonald positioned himself near the makeshift podium, which was, in reality, nothing more than a wooden crate inverted, and surveyed the assembled pilots of the distinguished 475th Fighter Group. 43 individuals, the vast majority under the age of 25, all possessed that unmistakable 1,000-yard stare, a vacant, distant gaze born from an accumulation of too many harrowing hours spent patrolling hostile skies, their minds perpetually fixated on dwindling fuel gauges. Some had managed to procure folding chairs, likely liberated from various supply depots. Others sat cross-legged directly on the dirt floor, while a few preferred to lean casually against the walls, arms folded, an air of quiet anticipation about them. "Gentlemen," MacDonald began, his voice, though not loud, effectively cut through the low hum of their initial conversations. "Mr. Lindbergh has something of considerable importance he wishes to impart regarding methods for significantly extending our operational range capabilities." Lindbergh then stepped forward, exhibiting the measured self-assurance of an individual well accustomed to addressing skeptical audiences. He wore the identical Navy khakis from their meeting 2 days prior, although MacDonald now discerned the subtle, distinguishing details that set him apart from standard military issue: a distinctly civilian wristwatch, the absence of any regulation insignia, and the inherent, almost unconscious grace in his movements, indicative of someone who had devoted decades of his life to the intricate world of aircraft. "Reduce your standard 2200 RPM to 1600, Lindbergh stated without any preliminary remarks or introductory pleasantries. There was no warm-up, no context setting, just the immediate, stark, technical specification that held the potential to either preserve precious lives or, conversely, catastrophically, destroy vital engines. Furthermore, set your fuel mixtures to auto-lean instead of the customary auto-rich. You will then need to increase manifold pressures slightly to adequately compensate for these adjustments." The ensuing silence was of a particular quality MacDonald had encountered before. Not one of utter confusion, but rather The audible mental grinding of pilots strenuously attempting to reconcile this radical new information with every single principle and procedure they had ever been taught. Lieutenant Bobby Johnson, recognized as one of their most dependable formation leaders, hesitantly raised his hand. "Sir, are you genuinely suggesting we can decrease RPM to 1600 while simultaneously employing 30 inches of mercury manifold pressure?" "That is precisely correct," Lindbergh affirmed with unwavering conviction.
The projected fuel savings range between 50 and 100 gallons per mission, contingent upon prevailing conditions and the overall flight duration. The silence in the hall deepened palpably. MacDonald meticulously observed the faces of his pilots, discerning a complex interplay of hope juxtaposed with outright horror etched across their features. Hope, because a greater operational range translated directly into improved survival odds, significantly enhanced tactical flexibility, and the newfound capacity to reach strategic targets that had previously remained tantalizingly beyond their operational grasp. Horror, conversely, because every flight instructor, every comprehensive technical manual, and every specialized engine school had meticulously drilled into them the same foundational, sacrosanct principle. Never, under any circumstances, run an engine over square, a configuration believed to invite catastrophic failure. Captain Jim Watkins, articulating the collective apprehension, voiced what was undoubtedly on every pilot's mind. "Mr. Lindbergh, that technique is certain to burn up our engines. We have consistently been instructed that operating with low RPM and high manifold pressure invariably induces engine detonation, leading to severe damage." "You have been misinformed," Lindbergh interjected, his voice imbued with the quiet, unshakable authority of absolute certainty and profound experience. "The efficacy of this technique stems from the fact that you are indeed maintaining a high manifold pressure while reducing RPM, not operating both parameters at an elevated level simultaneously. When this method is combined with auto-lean mixture settings, as opposed to the standard auto-rich, it dramatically reduces overall fuel consumption to approximately 70 gallons per hour in total." Lieutenant Thomas Hayes, a youthful aviator barely 22 years old and still possessing the eager intensity characteristic of someone who had graduated flight school a mere 6 months prior, swiftly performed the necessary calculations aloud. 70 gallons an hour versus our current consumption of over 100 gallons. That represents an astonishing reduction of almost 30%. Over 100, yes. That represents nearly a 30% improvement. Indeed, the enhancement is even more substantial, Lindbergh responded. When operating at an indicated airspeed of 185 miles per hour, this particular method yields approximately 6 miles per gallon. Consequently, your operational combat radius expands from an initial 570 miles to a potential 700. And under optimal circumstances, perhaps even 750 miles. These pivotal figures resonated in the heavy, humid air, possessing the latent power of unexploded ordnance. MacDonald keenly observed his pilots, their minds visibly grappling with the practical ramifications of such statistics. A combat radius extending to 750 miles suddenly rendered missions feasible that had previously been deemed utterly unattainable. Deep penetration strikes into Japanese-held territories, which had until now remained beyond the reach of their aircraft's fuel capacity. Yet, the reluctance among the airmen transcended mere mathematical considerations.
These seasoned warriors had survived countless engagements by rigidly adhering to established protocols designed to safeguard their engines and ensure their aircraft remained airborne. The Allison Villa 1710 power plants, fitted in their P-38s, were notoriously temperamental, even under routine operational conditions. The notion of deviating from prescribed crew settings felt akin to staking their very lives on an uncertain gamble. "Sir," interjected Major Pete Peterson, a battle-hardened veteran of numerous sorties over Rabaul, whose skepticism was forged in the crucible of harsh experience. "Every single technical directive we have encountered explicitly cautions against over-square operation, citing the severe risks of engine knock and consequential piston damage. The procedure appears contentious, primarily because your training has instilled the belief that it would inflict harm upon the engines," Lindbergh calmly retorted. "However, it is imperative to scrutinize the origins of that instruction. How many of your instructors possessed genuine expertise in sustained, long-range cruise flight? Furthermore, how many among them had actually operated these specific power plants under conditions demanding extended endurance?" Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Please write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. This probing inquiry struck at the very core of the pilot's predicament. Conventional military flight instruction predominantly emphasized combat maneuvering, precise formation flying, and accurate gunnery skills, rather than the sophisticated, fuel-efficient, long-range cruise techniques that Lindbergh had meticulously refined over his extensive decades in civilian aviation. The existing technical orders, it became clear, were authored by engineers whose primary concern was engine longevity, often at the expense of operational range, operating under the implicit assumption that fuel capacity, rather than its rate of consumption, would invariably dictate mission limitations. Lieutenant Colonel Smith, who had maintained a thoughtful silence throughout Lindbergh's detailed exposition, finally broke his quietude. "Mr. Lindbergh, you are proposing that we undertake missions lasting 9 hours. Already, 7 hours confined within a lightning cockpit is an ordeal, perched atop emergency equipment, contending with the idiosyncrasies of the oxygen system, and battling the insidious onset of fatigue that inevitably compromises judgment." He swept a hand towards the assembled pilots. 9 hours, quite frankly, strikes me as being beyond the limits of human endurance." MacDonald's grim nod underscored the validity of these concerns. The physiological demands were undeniably real and could not be lightly dismissed. P-38 cockpits were inherently restrictive, even in ideal scenarios, and prolonged missions necessitated sitting for hours on parachutes, inflatable rafts, and other survival apparatus. Oxygen masks, initially tolerable, grew progressively uncomfortable, while radio headsets created persistent pressure points. Compounding these physical discomforts was the immense mental strain of navigating over vast, featureless, oceanic expanses, a challenge that could wear down even the most experienced aviators. "The endurance challenge is indeed legitimate," Lindbergh conceded, acknowledging the palpable difficulties. "However, it is crucial to consider the dire alternative. How many valuable pilots have you tragically lost due to fuel exhaustion? How many vital missions have been prematurely terminated because insufficient fuel margins precluded adequate time over the target?" This pointed question resonated deeply, striking a painful chord with every pilot present, for each man in the room intimately knew the devastating answers. Far too many brave airmen had simply vanished over the immense Pacific, their aircraft disappearing without a trace as their fuel supplies dwindled hundreds of miles from any landmass. Others had been compelled to abandon their objectives prematurely, allowing enemy installations to remain operational and unmolested due to the critical absence of sufficient fuel to complete their attacks.
The fundamental choice before us is not merely between comfort and discomfort, Lindbergh continued, his voice steady and quiet. Rather, it is a stark decision between adopting proven techniques that demonstrably expand your operational capabilities and clinging to conventional methodologies that may be needlessly curtailing your effectiveness. MacDonald meticulously scanned the faces of his men, discerning a complex blend of burgeoning curiosity and lingering apprehension in their expressions. These were battle-hardened veterans who had, through sheer necessity, learned to place implicit trust in their equipment and their rigorous training. Yet they were also pragmatists, acutely aware that survival in their perilous profession frequently hinged upon their capacity to adapt to novel information and innovative approaches. "Mr. Lindbergh," MacDonald finally articulated, his voice firm, "would you be prepared to personally demonstrate this technique on an actual combat mission?" The morning of July 3rd dawned with exceptional clarity over Hollandia, offering an unobstructed vista that stretched to the distant horizon for the first time in a full week. MacDonald stood vigilantly beside his P-38 Lightning at precisely 5:30 hours, observing the diligent ground crews as they meticulously completed their pre-flight inspections, the tropical air still retaining the refreshing coolness of the receding night. Today's perilous mission was designed to rigorously test every assertion Lindbergh had made regarding advanced fuel management. A daunting 1,280-mile round trip that would push even the most conventional fuel planning to its absolute, unforgiving limits. Lindbergh emerged from the operations tent, carrying his flight gear with the measured, deliberate movements of an individual who had performed this ritual countless thousands of times. His borrowed flight suit, though not custom-tailored, fit him reasonably well. Yet MacDonald noted the distinct presence of civilian flying boots, rather than the regulation military issue. More telling still was the effortless ease with which he handled his essential equipment, the parachute harness, the Mae West life jacket, the oxygen mask, and the survival kit, each item arranged with the meticulous efficiency born of extensive, lifelong practice. "The weather appears highly favorable for the demonstration," Lindbergh observed, his gaze sweeping towards the eastern horizon, where the nascent sun was commencing its daily task of dissipating the overnight haze. Visibility should remain unimpaired for navigational purposes, and winds are projected to be minimal. MacDonald merely nodded in acknowledgement, though his own focus was entirely consumed by the intricate fuel calculations he had meticulously rerun no less than 3 times during the preceding night. He understood with chilling clarity that standard cruise settings would demand every single drop of the aircraft's internal fuel capacity, leaving virtually no reserve whatsoever for unforeseen combat maneuvering or unexpected headwinds. Should Lindbergh's innovative technique fail to deliver the promised fuel economies, they would find themselves grimly calculating glide ratios over the vast, unforgiving expanse of the open ocean. "Tommy will be flying your wing today," MacDonald stated,
gesturing towards where Major Thomas Maguire was diligently completing his own pre-flight inspection 2 aircraft down the flight line. He will be monitoring your fuel consumption with extreme diligence. Maguire, hearing his name, glanced up and offered a brief, crisp wave. As America's second highest scoring ace, he had specifically volunteered for this critical mission to personally observe Lindbergh's unorthodox methods under authentic combat conditions. The prevailing logic was simple and compelling. If this advanced fuel management technique proved effective for an individual with Maguire's notoriously aggressive flying style, it would undoubtedly prove viable for every single pilot within the squadron. The mission briefing presented a clear objective: to conduct reconnaissance patrols in designated sectors situated to the northeast of their current base of operations, with the added potential for engaging Japanese logistical infrastructure located on a cluster of small islands. While this assignment did not deviate significantly from the routine operations they had undertaken recently, the considerable distance required to reach and execute the mission would undeniably challenge the aircraft's fuel economy capabilities and the pilot's physical and mental stamina. Lindbergh, with the fluidity born of extensive experience, settled into the confines of his cockpit, his every motion purposeful and exact. From his vantage point, MacDonald observed the civilian aviator meticulously progress through his pre-flight checklist, particularly noting the extended attention Lindbergh devoted to the intricate settings of the fuel system. Diverging sharply from established military protocols, Lindbergh deliberately positioned his mixture controls to an auto-lean configuration prior to initiating engine ignition. Furthermore, his propeller controls were calibrated for a revolutions per minute, RPM, considerably lower than the parameters any P-38 pilot had been instructed to employ. The twin Allison V1710 engines subsequently roared to life without incident, emitting their distinctive high-pitched whine as their turbo-superchargers rapidly accelerated to optimal operational speed. However, the moment taxi clearance was granted, MacDonald instantly perceived a marked distinction. Lindbergh's engines operated with a discernibly reduced noise level compared to conventional settings, their exhaust note possessing a richer, less assertive timbre. We urge you to stay with us and witness the culmination of this remarkable demonstration at the end of the video. Your support, in the form of a like and subscription, would be immensely appreciated. Please also consider sharing where you are from and your thoughts on this fascinating topic in the comments section below. Hollandia Tower, Lightning Flight, requests permission for takeoff, MacDonald communicated through the radio. The control tower promptly responded, "Lightning Flight, you are cleared for takeoff on runway 27. Current conditions indicate calm winds and unlimited visibility." The quartet of P-38s subsequently ascended gracefully in a coordinated formation, steadily gaining altitude, reaching 3,000 feet as they set a course northeastward towards their designated patrol sector. MacDonald, adhering strictly to established operational guidelines, maintained his throttles and mixture controls at their prescribed settings, all the while keeping a vigilant visual watch on Lindbergh's aircraft, which held its position on his right wing. Even during this initial ascent phase, it was evident to him that Lindbergh's engines, despite their unconventional adjustments, appeared to be generating an equivalent amount of power. Upon reaching their designated cruise altitude, the practical demonstration of Lindbergh's innovative techniques commenced in earnest. Lindbergh's voice, imbued with an air of technical authority, cut through the radio waves. I am now reducing RPM to 1600, setting manifold pressure to 30 inches, maintaining the mixture in an auto-lean state, and indicating an airspeed of 185. McDonald meticulously verified these parameters against his own aircraft's instrumentation. His P-38 was, as anticipated, consuming aviation fuel at the standard rate of approximately 52 gallons per engine per hour, culminating in a total consumption of 104 gallons hourly. Nevertheless, direct visual assessment indicated that Lindbergh's aircraft was effortlessly sustaining an identical airspeed and altitude, notwithstanding the stark divergence in its engine configurations. The initial hour of the flight elapsed without incident, with the navigational trajectory unfolding precisely according to the pre-flight plan. McDonald, however, found himself consulting his fuel flow gauges with an unusual frequency, meticulously cross-referencing his own consumption rates against the projections derived from mission planning calculations. While his aircraft's performance aligned perfectly with expected parameters, this very consistency underscored the growing importance of Lindbergh's assertions. If the civilian pilot was indeed capable of realizing a 30% reduction in fuel consumption while concurrently preserving standard cruise performance, the ramifications for the vast and demanding Pacific theater of operations would be nothing short of revolutionary. At the 1 hour and 30-minute juncture of their mission, McGuire's voice punctuated the radio's quiet hum. "Lead," he broadcast. "My instruments are indicating a fuel flow that is approximately 20% below what is considered normal for this particular phase of flight." This unsolicited transmission served to corroborate a suspicion that had begun to form in McDonald's mind. It appeared that even McGuire, despite operating with standard cruise settings, was, by virtue of closely observing Lindbergh's meticulous technique, unconsciously internalizing and implementing more efficient power management strategies. The mere psychological impact of witnessing such effective fuel conservation in real time was subtly yet profoundly influencing the flying practices of the entire formation. Precisely 2 hours into their operational flight, the squadron encountered its inaugural tactical engagement. Prior intelligence dispatches had suggested the potential presence of Japanese barge movements in the vicinity of Samat Island, and subsequent visual reconnaissance unequivocally substantiated the existence of multiple targets securely moored within a sheltered cove. The established protocol for such an assault mandated high-velocity passes executed with maximum power settings, a maneuver inherently demanding of fuel, and precisely the type of action that frequently rendered extended-range missions particularly challenging from a logistical standpoint. "Lightning flight. This is lead. The target area is directly ahead. Prepare for ground attack," McDonald's authoritative voice announced. He then advanced his throttles, immediately sensing the robust surge of power from both engines as the fuel flow instantaneously escalated to maximum combat consumption rates. The ensuing attack sequence unfolded precisely as anticipated, encompassing aggressive diving approaches, repeated strafing runs, and agile defensive maneuvers designed to evade the incoming anti-aircraft fire. Throughout this intense engagement, McDonald observed that Lindbergh steadfastly maintained his position within the formation, his aircraft exhibiting entirely normal responsiveness to the demands of combat power, notwithstanding its previously established unconventional cruise configuration. The aerial engagement persisted for a duration of 12 minutes, during which all 4 aircraft expended a substantial quantity of ammunition against the Japanese barges and the fortified shore installations. As they initiated their ascent back to the more economical cruise altitude, McDonald meticulously reset his engines to the standard long-range operational settings, simultaneously keeping a close watch on his remaining fuel reserves. The intense combat power demands had, as anticipated, consumed fuel at the projected rates, leaving his aircraft with an approximate 60% of its total capacity for the journey back to base. "Lead. Request a fuel check," McDonald transmitted across the radio network. McGuire's voice promptly responded. "Number 2 is indicating 60% remaining." Following this, Lindbergh's calm voice reported, "Number 3, 58%. Number 4, 72% remaining." McDonald, utterly convinced he had misheard the critical transmission, double-checked his radio settings. "Did you say 72%? he inquired, disbelief evident in his tone. After an extended period of 2 hours of cruise flight and a demanding 12 minutes of active combat maneuvering, Lindbergh's aircraft astonishingly retained nearly 3/4 of its initial fuel load. These figures, by every metric McDonald comprehended regarding the P-38's typical fuel consumption, seemed utterly unfathomable. "Please repeat the reported fuel remaining," McDonald requested, seeking absolute clarity. 72% confirmed," Lindbergh reiterated with unwavering certainty. He further elaborated, "My fuel flow during the cruise portion of the flight has consistently averaged approximately 70 gallons per hour in total." The numerical evidence presented an incontrovertible truth. Whereas McDonald's own aircraft had expended an estimated 200 gallons of fuel during the initial segment of their mission, Lindbergh's P-38 had utilized a mere 140 gallons to cover the exact same distance and duration of flight. The impressive 30% reduction in fuel consumption precisely mirrored the figures Lindbergh had guaranteed during the pre-mission briefing. However, witnessing this dramatic efficiency firsthand, not merely in controlled test conditions, but under the rigorous and unpredictable demands of actual combat operations, elevated a theoretical possibility into a tangible, operational reality, with profound implications. The subsequent return leg of their journey offered further compelling corroboration of Lindbergh's innovative methods. Even as he diligently maintained the designated formation airspeed and altitude, Lindbergh's aircraft consistently exhibited a significantly reduced rate of fuel consumption compared to standard cruise settings. By the time the familiar coastline of Hollandia emerged into view, McDonald found himself mentally tabulating fuel reserves that appeared almost opulent, a stark contrast to the typically stringent and precise planning margins they were accustomed to. The pilots, accustomed to meticulous operational planning, found themselves experiencing a flight profile that felt almost extravagant in its departure from their usual stringent parameters. Upon landing, the complete scope of the demonstration's efficacy was immediately apparent. Ground crews with practiced efficiency forthwith initiated precise fuel measurements, utilizing finely calibrated dipsticks to ascertain the exact consumption for each aerial machine. Colonel McDonald, the squadron commander, returned with a mere 18% of his fuel remaining, a quantity deemed sufficient for mission accomplishment, but offering scant reserve for any unforeseen exigencies that might arise. Conversely, Lindbergh, the civilian expert, emerged from his cockpit with a generous 34% of his fuel still held within his aircraft's tanks. The initial tremors of doubt began to ripple through the ranks of the ground personnel. Technical Sergeant Mike Kowalski, a venerable mechanic whose hands had tended to P-38 engines since before the fateful attack on Pearl Harbor, possessed an innate understanding of fuel dynamics, akin to a seasoned banker's grasp of compound interest, an insight derived from the daily, painstaking observation of immutable numerical truths. When Lindbergh's iconic Lightning consistently completed its sorties with fuel gauge readings that unequivocally contradicted every operational manual Kowalski had ever meticulously perused, this veteran craftsman began to pose inquiries that, by their very nature, transcended the rigid strictures of military hierarchy. "Colonel MacDonald, sir," Kowalski stated with a directness born of irrefutable data, following the fifth consecutive mission, where Lindbergh's aircraft exhibited a fuel consumption rate that was a remarkable 30% below the established standard. "It appears this civilian either possesses engines imbued with some form of arcane power, or everything we have been meticulously instructed regarding optimal cruise settings is fundamentally erroneous." MacDonald, finding himself increasingly in agreement during these unfolding dialogues, noted the accumulating evidence. The data, amassing with undeniable mathematical precision, could neither be facilely dismissed nor conveniently rationalized away. Mission after mission, Lindbergh's aircraft returned with quantities of fuel that, according to conventional wisdom, should have been an impossibility given the vast distances traversed and the prolonged durations airborne. Furthermore, and perhaps more significantly, his engines displayed no discernible indications of the wear or damage that established military doctrine adamantly insisted would inevitably result from what was termed over-square operation. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. The recalcitrance emanating from the pilots themselves, however, proved to be far more entrenched than the objective mechanical evidence. Lieutenant Hayes, one of the aviators who had bravely volunteered to put Lindbergh's unconventional techniques to the test on a dedicated training flight, disembarked from his initial attempt, visibly disquieted, profoundly affected by the intense psychological burden of operating engines in configurations that directly contravened every tenet of his extensive aeronautical instruction. "It felt intrinsically wrong for the entire duration, sir," he reported to Colonel MacDonald, his voice reflecting the strain, "as if I was perpetually on the precipice of an imminent, catastrophic explosion." Yet, despite his profound discomfort, Hayes also confirmed a fuel consumption rate that corresponded with Lindbergh's assertions with near-perfect fidelity. A mere 73 gallons per hour overall, starkly contrasting with his typical burn rate exceeding 100 gallons. The lieutenant's aircraft fuel gauges, impartial and objective, remained impervious to his internal trepidation. They simply registered the unassailable mathematical reality of significantly enhanced operational efficiency. Major Peterson, a formidable figure, epitomized the unwavering resolve of the old guard in their final stand against the adoption of this novel technique. A seasoned veteran of numerous perilous missions flown over heavily fortified Japanese positions, Peterson's very survival was a testament to his strict adherence to established operational procedures, practices that had kept his aircraft aloft when other, less disciplined pilots had recklessly pushed their luck too far. "Mr. Lindbergh," he declared during one particularly fervent discussion within the confines of the operations tent, his voice resonating with conviction, "you are asking us to wager our very lives on methodologies that directly contradict the entirety of our accumulated knowledge regarding engine management. Lindbergh's rejoinder was delivered with the composed, patient tone of an individual well acquainted with and accustomed to the inherent skepticism often accompanying technical innovation.
Major, he calmly explained, the entirety of your understanding regarding engine management stems from training regimens meticulously designed for fundamentally disparate operational requirements, namely short-duration flights, maximum power settings, and the conservative safety margins appropriately integrated into training environments. He then extended a purposeful gesture toward the sprawling mission planning board, its surface crisscrossed with projected flight paths that stretched for hundreds of miles across the vast, empty expanse of the Pacific Ocean. These specific missions, Lindbergh emphasized, imperatively demand efficiency techniques that were, quite simply, never incorporated into the standard military curriculum.
The decisive breakthrough, the pivotal moment that began to turn the tide of skepticism, manifested during a critical mission to Wewak on the 28th of July. Colonel MacDonald had meticulously orchestrated the strike as a conventional formation attack targeting Japanese supply installations. However, corroborating intelligence reports had strongly indicated the presence of formidable enemy fighter opposition. Precisely the kind of protracted air-to-air engagement that would rigorously test every conceivable facet of aircraft performance under the most arduous and demanding conditions imaginable. Lindbergh, on that momentous day, flew on the wing of Maguire, strategically positioning himself where the squadron's most battle-hardened and experienced combat pilot could directly observe his innovative techniques during the crucible of actual aerial combat. The intricate mission profile stipulated a formidable 400-mile transit to the designated target area, to be followed by potential air-to-air engagements, subsequent ground attack operations, and the arduous return flight. Precisely the type of complex, multifaceted operation where superior fuel management could unequivocally signify the crucial demarcation between mission triumph and catastrophic failure. As intelligence had precisely predicted, the American formation encountered Japanese aircraft. A menacing contingent of Mitsubishi Ki-51 dive bombers, meticulously escorted by agile Zero fighters, approaching Wewak from the northwest quadrant. The engagement itself commenced with the application of standard tactical protocols. Leveraging altitude advantage, executing coordinated attacks, and employing aggressive maneuvering to secure advantageous firing positions. Yet, as the intense dogfight protracted itself far beyond its normal duration, fuel consumption rapidly escalated into a critically decisive factor for every pilot embroiled in the aerial melee. Colonel MacDonald observed the dynamic aerial combat unfold with the dispassionate precision characteristic of a seasoned commander who had witnessed an abundance of similar engagements. P-38 Lightnings deftly maneuvering against nimble Japanese fighters in elaborate three-dimensional chess matches where instantaneous split-second decisions were the sole arbiter of survival. Ammunition expenditure, the relentless rates of fuel burn, and the ever-shifting tactical positioning all converged as integral components in the complex calculations that pilots instinctively performed, even as they endured multiple G-forces during violent combat turns. The leader of the Japanese formation, an individual subsequently identified as the formidable Captain Saburo Shimada, exhibited the brand of audacious and aggressive flying that had firmly cemented the legendary status of Zero pilots during the nascent stages of the conflict. Shimada's aircraft, a blur of speed and precision, effortlessly carved through the American defensive maneuvers with an almost surgical accuracy, a testament to what could only be hundreds of hours of accumulated combat experience. This relentless skill compelled the American pilots to respond by engaging their engines at maximum power settings, a necessity that, while tactically effective, consumed precious fuel at rates significantly exceeding the more economical cruise consumption. McGuire's voice, strained and urgent, crackled through the radio during a fleeting lull in the engagement, cutting through the cacophony of battle. Multiple bandits, ammunition running low, fuel becoming a factor. This was precisely the kind of harrowing situation that served to distinguish truly experienced combat pilots from those who had not yet acquired the crucial ability to simultaneously manage a multitude of emergent crisis factors. The dwindling ammunition supply, the rapidly diminishing fuel reserves, the inherent capabilities of the enemy aircraft, the critical distance to their base, and the prevailing weather conditions all demanded instantaneous evaluation and strategic consideration, all while rigorously maintaining a comprehensive and unwavering situational awareness within the chaotic three-dimensional expanse of aerial combat. Lindbergh's exceptional adeptness was on full display in the dynamic environment of three-dimensional aerial combat. His P-38 Lightning, a formidable twin-boomed fighter, was piloted through the dogfight with the identical, meticulous control and economy of movement he habitually exhibited during routine cruise flight. There was an absolute absence of superfluous maneuvers or excessive power adjustments, and his tactical placement within the engagement was consistently optimal, strongly indicating a profound familiarity and innate comfort with the P-38's unique handling characteristics and operational envelope. This fusion of efficiency and aggression was a hallmark of his unconventional approach. Confronted by Shimada's crippled aircraft, which abruptly veered directly into his path in what seemed to be a desperate, suicidal ramming maneuver, the civilian aviator's reaction was swift and unequivocally resolute. This intense, albeit short-lived, aerial skirmish culminated with Shimada's fighter plummeting uncontrollably towards the vast expanse of the ocean below, leaving a visible trail of smoke and disintegrating wreckage in its wake. Lindbergh had thus achieved his inaugural and ultimately sole aerial triumph of the conflict. However, the profound implications of this victory transcended the mere individual success in combat. It undeniably demonstrated that the application of fuel-efficient cruise methodologies, when skillfully employed by aviators possessing a deep comprehension of both advanced engine management and sophisticated tactical aerial maneuvers, in no way diminished, but rather enhanced, combat efficacy. The subsequent journey back to base offered irrefutable, definitive substantiation of the technique's profound, practical utility. Colonel MacDonald's squadron, a cohesive unit of P-38s, had remained aloft for an extended period exceeding 8 hours, a duration that encompassed significant segments of strenuous combat maneuvering, executed at their engines' maximum power output. Under conventional fuel planning protocols, such a protracted mission, particularly one involving intense engagement, would typically compel most pilots to meticulously assess their emergency landing alternatives or even contemplate the grim prospect of ditching their aircraft in the ocean, especially if adverse headwinds were to intensify. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Conversely and remarkably, the entire formation successfully returned to Hollandia, touching down with an astonishing surplus of fuel reserves that could only be described as lavish. Colonel MacDonald, for instance, brought his fighter in with enough fuel still in his tanks to sustain another hour of flight. Captain Maguire, who had diligently experimented with the refined cruise settings throughout the entire mission duration, reported comparable generous margins.
Yet it was Lindbergh's own fuel gauges that displayed quantities defying belief, a seemingly impossible amount of remaining fuel, sufficient for nearly 2 additional hours of flight time, a testament to the extreme efficiency achieved. The meticulous post-flight inspections, conducted by the dedicated ground crews, yielded no indications whatsoever of engine damage, nor any atypical wear patterns or mechanical malfunctions that would point to detrimental consequences arising from the over-square operational parameters.
In fact, Technical Sergeant Kowalski's comprehensive scrutiny of Lindbergh's specific engines unveiled an even more remarkable finding. They exhibited marginally less wear than those found in comparable aircraft that had been operated under the conventional standard power settings. This surprising outcome strongly implied that these highly efficient cruise techniques could, contrary to long-held beliefs, potentially prolong engine service life rather than diminish it. The electrifying news of this combat triumph disseminated throughout the ranks of the 475th Fighter Group with the characteristic swiftness and pervasive reach of all truly impactful military intelligence. Lindbergh had unequivocally showcased unparalleled fuel efficiency, even amidst the most arduous and unforgiving operational circumstances. He had furthermore demonstrated formidable combat prowess against seasoned adversary pilots, and, crucially, had returned with engine components in a state of preservation that directly repudiated every established caution regarding the supposed perils of over-square engine operation. That very evening, Major Peterson approached Colonel MacDonald, his demeanor betraying a reluctant admiration, the kind of grudging respect reserved for an individual whose deeply ingrained professional skepticism has been completely shattered and ultimately vanquished by a mountain of irrefutable evidence.
He formally stated, "Colonel, I respectfully request your authorization to implement Mr. Lindbergh's innovative techniques during our patrol mission scheduled for tomorrow." The metaphorical dam of resistance and doubt had, at long last, definitively fractured. Within an astonishingly brief span of a single week, every single pilot across the squadron was actively engaged in experimenting with the novel combination of reduced engine RPM settings and optimized auto-lean fuel mixtures.
The ensuing operational outcomes mirrored Lindbergh's initial predictions with an almost uncanny mathematical precision. A consistent 30% reduction in fuel consumption, significantly expanded operational range capabilities, and, crucially, an absence of any mechanical issues that had not been erroneously forecast by outdated and now clearly obsolete training doctrine. Colonel MacDonald, observing these transformative developments, came to a profound realization. What they had collectively experienced transcended a mere technical demonstration or a clever operational tweak. They had, in essence, been direct witnesses to a fundamental paradigm shift, where long-established institutional knowledge and ingrained operational dogma had been directly confronted, rigorously challenged, and ultimately overturned by a body of empirical evidence so compelling and undeniable that it simply could not be disregarded or swept aside. By the advent of August 1944, this remarkable operational transformation had reached its full fruition. What had initially germinated as a singular civilian's contentious and highly unconventional proposition had, with astonishing rapidity, ascended to the status of standard operating procedure across every single P-38 unit deployed throughout the vast Pacific theater. This necessitated a whirlwind of activity. Flight manuals were urgently updated, technical orders were completely redrafted, and even seasoned instructor pilots found themselves in the unprecedented position of imparting methodologies that fundamentally opposed every tenet they had assimilated during their own formative training. This sweeping institutional revolution had unfolded with breathtaking velocity, propelled forward inexorably by concrete, measurable results that no commanding officer, however entrenched in old ways, could possibly disregard. Colonel MacDonald surveyed the mission planning boards within the bustling operations tent, his gaze falling upon strategic routes that only a few short months prior would have been deemed utterly unfeasible. These flight paths now boldly extended deep into previously impenetrable Japanese-controlled territory, encompassing ambitious 950-mile round trips to distant Balikpapan, protracted reconnaissance patrols stretching across the expansive Celebes Sea, and critical escort missions that pushed the P-38's inherent capabilities to operational extremes that, under the constraints of obsolete doctrine, had been relegated to the realm of mere fantasy. The quantitative data, presented with undeniable mathematical exactitude, eloquently narrated the profound impact of these changes. The combat radius, a critical metric for operational reach, had dramatically extended from 570 miles to an impressive 750 miles. Concurrently, fuel consumption witnessed a substantial reduction of 30%, while the overall mission capability, measured in terms of permissible flight duration, had expanded by a remarkable 40%. Colonel Lewis then approached, carrying the most recent operational reports. His countenance bore the distinct, gratified expression of an officer whose once intractable tactical dilemmas had been decisively resolved through an unforeseen yet brilliant innovation. He announced, "The 432nd Squadron successfully executed an 8-hour escort mission to Borneo just yesterday. They maintained full formation throughout, encountered no fuel emergencies whatsoever, and returned with more than adequate reserves for sustained combat maneuvering over the objective." The profound implications of this achievement were certainly not lost on Colonel MacDonald. Only a mere 4 months prior, the concept of conducting 8-hour missions had been confined to speculative theoretical discussions. Now, they had been transformed into routine operational realities, meticulously planned by pilots imbued with genuine confidence, rather than the precarious, desperate hope that had once characterized such ambitious undertakings. Parallel to the remarkable technical advancements, a significant psychological transformation also manifested. Air crews, once burdened by the constant anxiety of fuel scarcity, no longer had to compute their fuel margins with the grim, fatalistic precision of individuals who half expected to perish from depleted tanks while suspended over the vast, unforgiving expanse of the open ocean. Technical Sergeant Kowalski, initially a skeptic, had unexpectedly evolved into a preeminent authority on these novel operational procedures, actively instructing ground crews across the entire Pacific theater on the intricate nuances of optimal mixture settings and precise power management techniques designed to maximize fuel efficiency. His comprehensive maintenance reports consistently documented engine conditions that not only met but frequently surpassed standard operational parameters, thereby unequivocally refuting decades of entrenched warnings concerning potential over-square damage. During one of their routine maintenance briefings, Sergeant Kowalski provided further compelling evidence. Engines meticulously operated according to Mr. Lindbergh's prescribed settings are, in fact, exhibiting demonstrably less wear compared to analogous aircraft that are routinely run at conventional standard cruise power, he stated. He further elaborated on the underlying mechanisms, explaining the combination of distinctly lower combustion temperatures, significantly reduced mechanical stress on components, and markedly improved fuel atomization within the cylinders is unequivocally contributing to an extension of their service life rather than any perceived shortening. This profound technical vindication transcended mere mechanical validation. It carried a far more significant implication. It forcefully suggested that long-standing institutional knowledge, meticulously codified within training manuals and diligently perpetuated through successive generations of military instruction, could, in certain fundamental aspects, be entirely erroneous concerning basic operational principles. The ripple effects of this revelation extended far beyond the immediate concern of fuel consumption, delving into much deeper systemic questions regarding the very processes by which military organizations appraise, integrate, and ultimately adopt novel information and innovative methodologies. The squadron had meticulously assessed and subsequently integrated groundbreaking information into its operational protocols. Lieutenant Hayes, who had emerged as one of the most fervent proponents within the squadron for these innovative techniques, had personally accumulated more than 200 flight hours, meticulously applying Lindbergh's methodologies. His comprehensive logbook provided irrefutable documentation of the significant fuel savings achieved, which, in turn, translated into tangible, tactical advantages, demonstrably enhancing the unit's combat effectiveness and readiness. During a critical mission debriefing, Lieutenant Hayes conveyed to MacDonald, "Sir, yesterday's reconnaissance patrol to the distant island of Halmahera would have been utterly unfeasible had we adhered to our conventional cruise settings. We successfully maintained flight for a full 9 hours, actively engaged enemy aerial assets over our designated target area, and still managed to land with sufficient fuel reserves to sustain another hour of flight." This remarkable feat underscored the profound impact of the new procedures. The human element, much like the intricate technical systems, proved remarkably adaptable to these novel operational demands. Pilots, who initially harbored considerable apprehension regarding the prospect of 9-hour endurance missions, soon discovered an unexpected benefit. The significantly reduced engine noise and vibration resulting from the lower RPM settings actually led to a marked decrease in fatigue during these extended flights. This improvement in cockpit comfort was substantial. The demands placed upon the oxygen system remained well within manageable parameters, and the inherent psychological burden associated with constant, critical fuel calculations diminished to an entirely acceptable and less stressful level. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Major McGuire quickly distinguished himself as the most influential and effective champion of these new techniques among the combat pilot community. His formidable reputation carried considerable weight and authority throughout the entire fighter fraternity, and his unequivocal endorsement of Lindbergh's innovative methods profoundly swayed and convinced pilots across numerous squadrons to adopt the new protocols. The antiquated approach to fuel management was, in essence, detrimental to our capabilities, McGuire forthrightly observed during a pivotal assembly of squadron leaders. He clarified, this wasn't a matter of mechanical failure, but rather a consequence of self-imposed limitations that tragically prevented us from engaging targets that by all operational metrics ought to have been well within our strategic reach and operational capacity. The broader strategic ramifications of these advancements rapidly became unequivocally clear as mission planners began to fully grasp that P-38 units could now undertake strike missions against targets previously deemed exclusively within the purview of longer-range bomber aircraft. Japanese installations, which had for so long remained safely beyond the operational radius of fighter cover, were suddenly rendered accessible to formations capable of sustained flight for nearly 10 hours, crucially retaining ample fuel reserves for active combat operations. This newfound reach precipitated a significant shift in the tactical equilibrium across the vast Pacific theater, as American fighters acquired an operational range that finally aligned with the immense geographical distances inherent in oceanic warfare. News of this extraordinary fuel efficiency breakthrough propagated rapidly, not through conventional military channels, but via the highly effective, unofficial networks that interconnected P-38 pilots across the entirety of the Pacific theater. Squadron commanders, from the distant reaches of Australia in the south to the remote Aleutian Islands in the north, commenced an influx of requests for detailed briefings on these revolutionary cruise techniques, which promised to dramatically extend their operational capabilities. This informal yet highly efficient communication network among fighter pilots proved far swifter in disseminating critical technical information than any official military bureaucracy. MacDonald soon found himself inundated with requests for guidance and expertise from units operating as far afield as the China-Burma-India theater, where P-38 pilots contended with remarkably similar range limitations over equally formidable and challenging terrain. The very techniques that Lindbergh had so effectively demonstrated and refined over the vast expanses of Pacific waters proved to be equally efficacious when applied over the towering Himalayan peaks and through the dense Burmese jungles, thereby conclusively confirming that the fundamental principles of fuel efficiency transcended any specific operational environment or geographical context. By the latter half of 1944, training squadrons located within the continental United States had fully integrated these advanced cruise procedures into their standard instructional curricula. Consequently, newly graduated pilots arriving at Pacific combat units were already thoroughly familiar with techniques that their predecessors had been compelled to acquire through perilous trial and error, often under hostile enemy skies. This systematic approach to training had dramatically compressed the institutional learning curve, transforming what had previously required months of dangerous combat experience into mere weeks of structured, comprehensive instruction. The statistical evidence supporting the efficacy of these new methods became undeniably overwhelming as operational reports steadily accumulated. Measurable improvements in pilot survival rates were directly observed, correlating precisely with a significant decrease in fuel-related emergencies. Concurrently, mission success rates saw a notable increase, largely attributable to the ability of fighter formations to sustain their presence over target areas for considerably extended periods. Enemy installations, once afforded a degree of protection by their sheer remoteness, were now rendered vulnerable to regular and sustained attacks by fighter aircraft, capable of reaching them with more than adequate fuel reserves for engagement. Lindbergh's departure from Hollandia in August 1944 marked the conclusion of his direct, hands-on involvement with Pacific operations. Nevertheless, his profound technical contributions continued to exert a significant and lasting influence on combat effectiveness throughout the remaining years of the war. He bequeathed a legacy, a highly skilled cadre of pilots and ground crews who possessed an intricate understanding of fuel management principles. This foundational knowledge would prove instrumental in the subsequent development of jet-powered aircraft in the post-war era. The institutional lesson derived from this experience extended far beyond the confines of aviation, prompting broader inquiries and re-evaluations concerning established military doctrine and the inherent value of innovation. The groundbreaking P-38 fuel efficiency breakthrough served as a powerful demonstration that conventional wisdom, even when rigorously supported by extensive training programs and comprehensive technical documentation, could be fundamentally flawed regarding core operational principles. The remarkable speed with which these novel techniques supplanted long-established procedures strongly suggested that military organizations possessed an inherent capacity for rapid adaptation when confronted with undeniable and irrefutable evidence that simply could not be dismissed. McDonald's final and comprehensive mission report to higher headquarters meticulously quantified this profound transformation in terms that resonated directly with strategic planners. A remarkable 31% extension in combat radius, a substantial 30% reduction in overall fuel consumption, and an impressive 40% increase in mission duration capability. These compelling numerical statistics directly translated into significant tactical advantages, which, in turn, profoundly influenced air campaign planning across the entire Pacific theater. Moreover, they established crucial precedents for long-range fighter operations, precedents that would continue to shape military aviation through conflicts such as the Korean War and well into subsequent eras. The quiet yet revolutionary transformation, which originated from a single civilian's unconventional suggestion to experiment with different engine settings, had fundamentally reshaped the operational paradigm for America's most strategically important fighter aircraft in the world's largest and most demanding theater of war. The overarching lesson gleaned from this experience was both remarkably simple and profoundly significant. At times, even established experts can be mistaken, and often the judicious act of conserving fuel can be the decisive factor in securing victory in battle.